Hello, and welcome back to the Parent Solution. Thank you all for tuning in today. I'm your host, Jamie, and I'm here with my partner, Kimberly. Let's dive in right away today. It is a topic that I personally hold very dear to my heart, and a topic we believe is at the forefront of our world today, especially amongst our youth. Today, Kimberly and I will be talking about mental health with respect to our youth today and some of the more pressing issues they are currently dealing with.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be with you here today. And I must say, I carry some very strong opinions here, all of which have everything to do with the overall health of not only my own students, but children around the country and around the globe. And Jamie, I'm really excited because I know you're an absolute expert on this topic. I guess my first question for you is, what kind of trends have you seen in your career over your career with mental health?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do believe that this topic brings up a lot of mixed emotions for a lot of people. I love that we have come so far with talking and accepting and slowly understanding mental health and all its components, and what it looks like and what it all means. And working in various settings with youth from juvenile detention centers to school boards and I mean everything else in between for the last 16 years, sorry. I've definitely seen different trends along the years. There has been years where bullying was a massive concern to gangs, self-harm, suicide, anxiety, followed by depression. Now, it's not to say that all those things are still a big concern because absolutely they are. But I will say anxiety is definitely on the rise amongst youth. And we are now starting to see anxiety in kiddos as young as 5. And as mentioned, we have come a long way with regards to accepting and working through mental health. And there are tons of resources out there for now that we can get for people to access. However, I strongly believe that we have a long way to go. I actually read a recent statistic the other day from 2021, and it said that 29% of parents admit that they would feel embarrassed if their child wanted counseling. And to me, it's sad that so many families still feel like this and that there's still that stigma around mental health. Um, and that was actually a statistic from parents of children aged 5 to 18 years of age.
Wow, so you're talking about kids that are like legitimate children. You're talking, anywhere from 5. That's very young, to 18, which is kind of what we in Western society have deemed as the cusp of adulthood here. So that's a wide range, but that's a high number, 29%. That's pretty ridiculous. For a society that is supposed to pride itself on, being open and honest and transparent about mental health and mental health issues. I think you're spot on when you say we still have a long way to go. I don't think that we are by any means where we should be in terms of practical solutions for mental health. Perhaps in awareness, it's become a lot more mainstream and more acceptable to talk about mental health in general. But in terms of actual solutions, I find that we're very, very lacking compared to some other countries, particularly European countries. They have a much better system than we do. I can really resonate with you about what you said about anxiety being on the rise, particularly within the past 10 to 15 years. I think, and from my own experiences too, a trend has emerged with children anywhere from ages 5 to 18. It really starts very, very young these days. And it's unfortunate that it is this sort of problem. And I can say, like I said, from my own experience, it's become a huge issue. Anxiety and the rise of anxiety and the rise of panic attacks and things like that, and all of the things that come along with anxiety and depression and that aspect of mental health, really. You mentioned that you've worked in and around these sorts of mental health stigmas during your years in the industry, and particularly in this case, anxiety. And In your professional opinion, what sorts of things do you think have caused this rise of anxiety in our youth?
Well, what a great loaded question. um, I mean, I can't say for certain, but I do believe that there is a number of factors that could be contributing to the rise that we're seeing in anxiety in our youth. And I think some things to consider are, the high expectations and pressures to succeed, between the standardized testing and culture of achievement. Today's youth can feel a pressure to succeed in ways, previous generations did not. And I'm sure you have a lot of experience and have seen that through your career as teaching.
Absolutely.
Um, and I think that's definitely on the rise. And I also believe between the schooling and a lot of the extracurricular activities that kids are put in, a part of me feels like they have no time to be kids anymore, if that makes sense. Um, you know, Quickly, one example I remember, um, kids that would come into my office and they're overwhelmed, they're stressed, and this was kids in grade 6, 7, 8, and they are overwhelmed, they are stressed, they can't keep up because they're full day of school, and then after school they're rushing off to violin, or they're rushing off, and then after that they have swimming, and then they have tutoring, and they come home at 9 o'clock at night to finish up their homework, to get up and go to school early the next day. So they can't keep up. And also I think a world that feels very scary and threatening, right? The past, we've had many school shootings. I know a lot, not so much in Canada, but it resulted in more drills and lockdowns in Canada. And that has been a huge trigger for some students, especially those that have come from other country where this was a norm for them, and they finally gotten away from all that. So it definitely could trigger the trauma and possible PTSD for those students as well. Um, for the past 2 years, we've all been living in a pandemic, and with lockdowns and the remote learning, it's a lack of socialization and the incredible things kids and youth have been missing out on. Like their prom, their graduation, their all the sports teams, the competition, and especially kids that don't thrive in the academic setting, that they go to school because they look forward to playing basketball, they look forward to playing their hockey. That's kind of what keeps them motivated on going.
And the academics are there just for them to, get through school and hopefully have some sort of academic knowledge. But they thrive on the socials and the extracurriculars and doing things with their friends and their peers.
Yeah. And with all of that being gone for this, for these, we're going on 2 years here. It's really done some major damage to our youth. Um, the new world that COVID created has made them extremely fearful, worried, and they're starting to get these panic attacks because of what we've been going through. Um, and a lot of the kids that I work with now, that seems to be the big trend, is dealing with the anxiety, and they don't know what's going on because they've never felt these emotions and feelings before. They don't understand why all of a sudden, they're in the middle of class and having a hard time breathing, or they can't comprehend what's happening because it's never happened.
Right.
Um,
And they've already got so much going on that it's difficult to, when you throw what the situation, what the world has become over the past 2 years, when you throw that in there, and you're trying to deal with all of this added stress. And you're right, they really don't understand, all the restrictions and all the new expectations and things like that, and with good reason, because really they don't make sense. But but that aside, you have the point is, you've got this extra mental stress that these kids do not understand and don't know how to cope with. We have adults that don't know how to cope with what's going on,
Yeah.
let alone when you put the added pressures of teenagers and growing up and trying to make your way through life and figure out what you want to do with yourself. When you throw all of that in there, it is a lot to handle for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And and also the added of, you know, there's a fear of the unknown out there right now, right? Um with everything that's been going on, and even adults, we don't know what's going to be happening tomorrow with the way things have been shifting and changing and stuff.
Yeah.
And I also think too, on that note, that social media is another big one. I believe today's children and teens are constantly connected to social media, and it's not surprising that their self-esteem and worldview becomes connected to responses to social media posts. It's hard for them not to compare their life and their social connections to what they see others posting on social media. They're always relating themselves to somebody else. They're always really, their life's better. I wish it was like them. I wish I looked like her. I wish I was an athlete like him. And it's that constant
Comparison.
comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that it's too much. It's too much for them to handle. They
Mm-hmm.
can't. I don't believe some of them are mature enough to handle the the social media world,
Mm-hmm. Simply
to be
because of the way
honest.
that social media operates, and especially over the last 2 years when we've taken things more digital. Technology does have its uses. Technology is brilliant. Technology is amazing, but
Hmm.
but you have to use technology. You can't let it use you. And I think that's
Yes.
that's a really good point with social media, is that with how our world has changed over the past 2 years, you have people, even adults, spending way too much time online, spending way too much time staring at a computer screen. When you throw in teenagers into that mix with social media and all of the online aspects of things, it is hard. It is hard, and it's no wonder. It is no wonder that they're having difficulties. I definitely see what you're saying. There's some trends here. I like when you talked briefly about children and their activities, and how they're always on the go, and they have violin, and then they have swimming, and then they have tutoring, and then they have something else, and then there's home life. Then, oh yeah, we have to eat too, right? I haven't eaten dinner, and it's like 7 o'clock at night. Um, a lot of times
Hmm.
kids are in something just to be in something, right? Like just for the sake of it. I think a lot of times we as parents get so busy trying to do all the things and trying to be all the things and trying to put them in all of the things because we love them and we want them to have the best of everything, right? Like we want to
Yeah.
give our kids a better life than we had. I think that's safe to say that most parents, regardless of their intentions for their children, or regardless of their specific intentions for their kids, they love them and they want them to have the best of everything. But I think that oftentimes as parents, we sometimes forget to prioritize, like, what is important. Is this thing, whether it's violin or swimming or tutoring or, like time with friends or whatever it is, prioritize what's important. And I think, like, as you said, letting kids be kids. Sometimes it is good for kids to do their own thing, let them be outside, or let them, if necessary, be bored. That's something that we don't often do as parents and as educators. Like we have this constant need to keep them busy, to keep them doing something, to keep them on a schedule.
Hmm.
And it's really resulted in this idea of a high achievement culture and of always being busy and this hustle culture, right? Which, I mean, I'm all for the hustle, but you also have to know when to take a step back. Like there has to be
Balance.
a balance. And these are kids. Like honestly, it is good for kids to be bored. I will say this as an educator. It is good for kids to be bored sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. Because when kids are bored, that's when their creativity comes to light. That's when they start thinking about things. That's when they're like, what can I do? When I remember when I was a child, we didn't have, like, we had a giant, like, old computer in our basement, like a one of those big ones with the big monitors on the back, and must have weighed like 100 pounds, right? And that was in, I was born in 1994. So for me, like, the internet has always been a thing. It's always been around. My dad, when I was younger, worked in IT. So we always had a computer in the house. We always had multiple computers in the house, but our time was very limited with tech. My parents would shut off the internet at a certain time, tell us to go outside, tell us to go find something to do. And we did. We played with chalk, we played hopscotch, we played skipping rope. Like, there's tons of things outside to do. And I know we've talked about this before too. Letting kids entertain themselves. There's a value in itself, of letting children entertain themselves, because, like I said, that's where the creativity comes in. That's where their critical thinking comes in. That's where this idea of independence comes in. And this hustle culture that we've developed of constantly doing something and constantly needing to be somewhere and do something, and oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I don't have anything on my schedule kind of idea, right? What's my kid doing? What do they need to do? Like, I need to keep them occupied. That's the kind of harmful narrative that we're seeing pushed onto a lot of our kids right now. And it's not right. It's really not right, because you're ending up with this generation of children that needs to be constantly entertained and needs to be constantly occupied. Otherwise, they sit there like they're zombies and they don't know what to do with themselves. I think you're absolutely right. Between the pressure of academic expectations and the lack of literal physical safety, and the mainstream psychological attack that's been going on for the past 2 years, it's honestly admirable that our kids have all been so put together, and how well they've really handled it. On a bit of a sobering note, I know that not all kids and teenagers and young adults have been able to handle it. There's suicides are up, youth depression and anxiety and all of those things are massively through the roof. The stats are ridiculously through the roof over the past two going on 2 years now. And while not all of them have been able to handle it, a lot of them have. We're certainly seeing some cracks, though, in the walls that our remaining kids have been building around themselves. And as a child and youth counselor, I'm sure you see this kind of thing all the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Kimberly. And the kids that I work with, and even my own kids, the resilience that I see in them is outstanding. By far, what they've accomplished and what they've pushed through, and you know, even in the last couple of years of in school, online, in school, back and forth. They don't know if they're coming or going, and even though even though they may not see it in themselves yet, it takes that one person to see it in them and help them see it for themselves, and you build on that, right? You point out the obstacles and the challenges that they've pushed through and mustered through, because there's days where, you know, the kids don't want to go to school, they don't want to show up, they don't want to do there. And if they're just reminded of, we felt this way before and we pushed through it, and what a great day you had, and just reminding them and putting them their resilience on the forefront for them to recognize, I think is really key. And in respect to anxiety, I see this I see this at the forefront with depression more so than anything else these days. And everyone experiences anxiety from time to time. Everyone. It alerts us to threats, it protects us from danger, and it helps us reach important goals. Small doses of anxiety in certain situations are very useful. But however, when your child is worrying too much of the time, or they're avoiding activities that they used to love, um, or refusing to go to school because he or she is scared or worried, that's when the anxiety becomes a problem. When you're noticing they're not into things anymore, when they're noticing they're alone, they're quiet, they've kind of come down off their normal quote unquote high.
Kind of, it's interrupting daily life.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the difference. I get a lot of questions of how do you know if it's just the normal kid, and the quote unquote normal anxieties that kids go through, or is it when it becomes more of an issue? And that's exactly it, when it's infuriating And with that, I like to think of anxiety like a fog.
Oh.
So, think of yourself when you're driving
Mm-hmm.
in a very foggy day.
Mm-hmm.
If it covers everything, if it makes it hard to see and stops your child from doing what they usually do and generally gets in the way, then it's likely to become a problem. So, my biggest thing is please do not dismiss your child's emotions or feelings when it comes to this kind of stuff. Because although you as a parent or even educator may not see or feel this being a problem, and you just want your child to quote unquote get over it, that is doing way more damage than we think. And you know if they could just get over it, trust me, they absolutely would.
I think that's another thing that's it's not funny, haha, but it's funny in the sense of, we as a society have coined this phrase of getting over it. But can you really ever just get over something? Like, do you think that if I wanted to be over something, I would be over it? Like, if it was just a matter of mind over matter, right? Then I would, right? And a lot of times as an adult, we have the ability to say, okay, mind over matter, and I'm going to deal with this because we have those critical thinking skills, and we have those problem solving skills, and we have this self-awareness to be able to put mind over matter and to be able to say, okay, I am going to just get over it. But when you have a child that doesn't have doesn't have that toolkit for to be able to process things and quote unquote get over it by themselves, that's when you need some help, right? So I think that's very valuable in the sense of making sure your kid has the proper tools and resources emotionally and physically and intellectually to be able to deal with problems that may arise, specifically anxiety. Yeah. And as adults, we might dismiss that as, oh, it's not important, but you have to think about things from the perspective of a child. They don't know any better, and they have no clue what they're doing, right? Like, they're just trying to deal with it the best way they know how. So I think that's really powerful. Yeah, absolutely. I never thought of it. You said, think of anxiety like a fog. I certainly have driven in fog before, so I can appreciate the
Hmm.
analogy. I think that's really good because, yeah, there are times when, it's just a light fog and I'm like, oh, it's okay. I can just keep going. I can keep driving. And there's times when, if it's a really heavy fog, you got to pull over and you got to wait for the
Yeah.
fog to clear. And I think that also says something about, you have to pull over and I mean, in the case of driving, you're waiting for the fog to clear. But in the case of dealing with anxiety, you got to pull
Hmm.
over sometimes and
Yeah.
deal with the problem before you get back
That's
on
when
the
you
road
pull out those coping
of life.
strategies and mechanisms that you just talked about, right?
I like that. That's really good. Okay, so enough with the actual like problem itself. I'm a solution-minded person, and I know that you are too. And that is the whole point of this podcast. You are the expert in this topic here. What are some solutions that we could maybe provide our listeners with when it comes to dealing with anxiety in some practical ways for our children?
Another loaded question. Yes, solutions. When our kids are anxious, it's natural to want to help them feel better. It's our inner instinct. When we see a child hurting for any reason, we want them to feel better. But when it comes to anxiety, trying to protect them from the things that upset them, you can accidentally make the anxiety worse. Um, so a great place to start is just slow down life. We've talked about this, I think, in every podcast so far. Just slow it down a bit. Talk with your child, be present with your child, play with your child is huge. And I mean, yes, child, we're talking, this could be little ones too, but you can, this all equivalents to 5 to 18 years of old, 18 years of age. Um, Kids only talk to those who listen. So if your kid is coming to you about these quote unquote small problems now, and you're there for them now, and you help them now, they're going to come to you later down the road when things get really big and ugly for them. And that's what ultimately what a parent wants. You want that open communication. You want that open, trusting relationship. So you got to start now. You got to show interest in your child's day. Ask questions. And the best way to help kids overcome anxiety is to teach them how to deal with the anxiety as it comes up.
Right. Rather than trying to eliminate it.
And with practice, they'll be less anxious. So I've kind of put together for you guys kind of my top 10 solutions that I think would be that our listeners would appreciate. I'm just kind of ramble them off, and hopefully you guys can write them down, or if you're driving, maybe listen to this episode later, because
a couple times
we don't want you writing and driving. So my top 10 solutions. The goal isn't to eliminate anxiety, but to help a child manage it. Don't avoid things just because they make your child anxious. A perfect example of this is your child doesn't want to go to school. They're anxious to go to school. The more you keep them home, the more of a struggle it's going to become for you. And that has, I know there's so many differences as to why kids don't want to go to school, but the more we feed into that, it's going to become a bigger issue. Always express positive but realistic expectations. Always respect their feelings, but don't empower them. Don't ask leading questions.
Mm-hmm.
Don't reinforce the child's fears. Encourage the child to tolerate their anxiety. Remember, we're working with it. We're not trying to submerge it.
Mm-hmm.
Try to keep the anticipation period short. Think things through with the child, and try to model a healthy ways of handling anxiety. Those are my top 10 go-tos for sure. And of course there's always the eating a well-balanced meal, getting enough sleep.
The nutrition and the lifestyle. Yeah.
Breathing exercises are incredible for anxiety. Regular exercise, getting outside, the meditation, and helping your child to get to know and understand their anxiety is a big one. When we get to understand it, we know what's kind of triggering it. We can kind of work from those triggers to help them manage it. Mindfulness is also one of my go-tos to help parents and kids working through anxiety. Helping and working with your child on what they're experiencing and becoming aware of emotions and practicing the emotional regulation will help identify those triggers for sure. And as I mentioned, always use understanding and supportive language. And some examples of that could be simple as "I'm here for you," or talk to me, tell me what's going on. How can I help? This feeling will go away. Let's get comfortable until it does. Let's sit with them and be uncomfortable with them. And a great question for the older kids too is, why do you think that is? Right? Why do you think this is happening?
Because they have the ability to have the skills to be a little bit more introspective about themselves, and figure out why they feel that way.
And of course, if it comes down to it, always seek professional help. If you are unsure if your child is suffering from anxiety, or just experiencing the quote unquote normal kid anxieties that we had spoken about, for sure.
I can really resonate with what you've said in terms of sitting with your kid and sitting with the discomfort. And that's something that even as adults we have to work on, right? Because oftentimes as parents, as educators, as people who are, as people who are responsible for these young, vulnerable, impressionable minds, sometimes all we want to do is fix the problem, right? And I find that men in general are very much geared towards this as well. They just want to fix the problem. Tell me what the problem is and I'll fix it, right? Whereas women want to talk about the problem. Women want to have a discussion, right? So as a society, women are much more geared towards that idea of let's talk about your feelings, right? Whereas men are more geared towards like, what's the solution? Let's fix the problem. But I really think that there's value in learning to sit with discomfort, and being able to be introspective, even if it's things that we don't like about ourselves or things that we have done or said or whatever, that we're not quite sure how to deal with them. You have to face those things. You're right. You can't run away. You can't, fix the problem right away. Any sort of solution is going to require work to get better. Any sort of fixing the problem is going to require work. You can't just say, okay, problem fixed. Sometimes it's not something that needs to be physically fixed. You've got to sit there with the discomfort. And I think that's really valuable in what you said. As a parent, you want to model that for your child. You want to model that idea of being a strong individual and, okay, this is an uncomfortable growth process, but you know what? I'm going to sit here and I'm going to deal with it, and I'm not going to run away, because that's what I need to do is sit here and process my feelings and process how I am feeling and why I feel that way. And as parents, I think, and, parents, educators, as just human beings, I think that's something that we can all use improvement on. But isn't that something that we want to model for our kids? Because what an amazing world it would be if we got that as children rather than as adults. And if we built that from the ground up, and we taught our kids to do that instead of trying to deal with it as adults, and we now have all of these other things to pull apart and deal with. If we just start from the ground up, like what a difference it would make. What a difference it would make. I think I thank you so much for opening up this whole conversation. I think that a lot of the solutions and a lot of the ideas here, it really starts with communication and quality communication at that. And you can only really build up from there. I really appreciate all the tips you shared today, Jamie, particularly your top 10. Personal learning, my personal favorite, I would say. And I think that kind of the theme that we've kind of referred to throughout this whole podcast is learning how to manage things, learning how to manage anxiety and not eliminate it. Definitely the best overall thing to keep in mind, I think, with all of these solutions.
Oh, it was absolutely my pleasure. I know that it was a lot to take in. I can talk about this for days and days on end.
The never-ending topic.
There's just so much still to say and unfold about this topic, right? There's just so much there. So it was absolute my pleasure. And if you guys are looking for more information or help your children, you can always reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to talk with you for sure.
Yeah. I personally, as an educator, I know some children that would benefit from working with you. And I think even as adults, like I've said, sometimes it helps to just have someone to talk to, and bounce things off of. Like I said, how much better is it if a child gets the help they need as a child, and not as a potentially damaged adult with all of these other life factors now in play, right? As an adult, you have other people usually heavily involved in your life, right? You have a sense of independence, but you've got sometimes kids, sometimes a partner, sometimes family, right? Like it is easier to deal with things and to start from the ground up as a child, learning how to deal with stuff rather than as an adult when you've got all of these other things in the mix. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. We appreciate you all. Remember, new episodes premiere every Tuesday at 5 a.m. EST on Spreaker. This is The Parent Solution. Remember, this is your one-stop shop for counseling insight and all things educational.